So just a very quick introduction to Pollen, who we are and what we do. We are relatively new company based in London and San Francisco. What we do is something actually relatively simple. What we do is as an app developer, we give you access to your App Store revenues earlier. So we effectively advance money and wait to collect directly from the App Store. The interesting thing is basically what you can do with that cash when you have it, and what I wanted to do today is introduce you to some new ideas basically around financing of UA campaigns, and also to the concept of what we're calling velocity capital. So apologies if this seems obvious to quite a lot of the audience, but the reason I'm going to say it is the number of developers we've had through our doors over the last few months means it's really kind of not getting through, so it's worth saying. So empirically, over the last few months, we've seen a lot of developers who, particularly on the indie side, where everything goes into the product, and you get to the end when it's actually time to launch it, and there's either no money or there's no knowledge. So it's completely swung towards product, not going to work. The other side we've seen is diametric opposite. It's where everything, basically, you think you can take anything with a bunch of money you can throw into it and it's going to fly. And ultimately that is not going to work either. There's some very simple economics behind it in terms of what it costs you to acquire a user and then what that user is going to pay you. And ultimately, no matter how much cash you chuck at it, it's not going to work unless you have the balance right. So getting the balance right involves a lot of time and testing in terms of, are you going to monetize properly? What are the hooks in the app, in the game, etc.? Showing that you're actually going to be able to monetize the user and how much you're going to make from them. And then the other side of the equation is how much is every customer going to cost you? Now, obviously, there's lots of issues around attribution and so on, and we're not going to try and get involved in solving those, but that market seems to be getting better. And really what we see is developers really needing to get behind their own user acquisition economics and some of the maths behind it. So again, apologies if this seems really obvious, but just from the people we've spoken to, it's not being done terribly well, and it's really simple in a way. What we're seeing is that those who are doing it successfully will spend time, and it might be a month, 2, 3, 6, it doesn't really matter, but the more time you spend testing, maybe in one English-speaking market, if you're a US or UK developer, testing and refining to work out and to have some reasonably accurate estimate of what a quality user is actually going to pay you in terms of lifetime value of that customer is really, really important. The other side of that, again, is the idea of being able to test. So test lots of different ad creatives, test lots of different times of day, test different ad networks, see how they're performing one against each other, and actually just spend time doing this. So with a reasonable level of certainty, obviously the scaling issue can cloud it, what that customer is going to cost you to acquire. And then once you've got that, you've really got a relatively simple formula where if you know what it's going to cost you to acquire the user, and you have a high degree of certainty about what that user is going to be paying you over time, and provided one is greater than the other, then you're going to have a success formula where the bit in the middle is your margin. So the kind of new perspective we wanted to add a little bit is just thinking how this stuff actually gets funded. So we've identified 3 kind of key types of people that we are working with. So at one end of the revenue scale, you've got independent developers. So many of these guys will have spent a lot of time and effort, sometimes years, creating their app or their game. And then in terms of promoting it, this is like the big question mark right at the end. So they think it's all about the product and actually getting it launched and monetized and marketed tends to kind of fall at the end of the track. So what we've seen is, I guess, a growing realization that in order to get any kind of traction at all, you have to put some effort and money into paid user acquisition. So once you see that sort of realization tick down, which is getting better, then you work out how the stuff is funded. So from an independent point of view, a lot of money goes on personal credit cards, thinking, well, I've bootstrapped it, or I've raised some venture money or some angel money, if you like, to get to this point. I'm going to basically load up my credit cards, and that's hopefully going to start to get me up the charts. More interestingly, you see venture-backed companies. So again, most venture-backed companies will overspend in terms of making the perfect product or game, and then very often go back to try and fund the marketing pieces. So you might have spent $1 million creating this beautiful game, but if you can't afford to actually go and market it, you're not going to get any traction at all, and the venture guys are not going to get their money back. The other thing that's notable is we've seen a lot of venture-backed companies effectively just take a direct transfer payment of their expensive dilutive venture capital and put it straight into advertising campaigns for the first 60 or 90 days of an app's life. And we think from a capital efficiency point of view, that's not a very clever way to spend money. Further up the numbers are some of the publishers that we've spoken to. So again, the supposition might be, hey, you've got pots of money. Why would anyone want to rethink how they're doing this? But actually, we've had some very interesting conversations. There's generally a pot of money used for discovering, localizing, tweaking a new app or game before it goes into the publisher's marketing machine, and those budgets are pretty tightly fought for internally. And what we've seen is, again, large amounts of those agreed budgets are basically just reserved for promotion. And again, we think there's a better way, when you actually sit down and look at the timelines and the numbers of funding it. So just to give you an idea, if you launch, let's say you're launching on the 1st of January, if you're on iOS, the first revenue you'll see either from the paid apps or from in-app purchases is going to be in early March. So you have a funding gap basically of 60 days, sometimes more than 60 days. It's a little shorter on Google Play, but generally most of the platforms are the same. You're talking days difference. So the idea is, if you're going to launch, maybe you're going to get featured in the first week, in which case you're going to get some great traffic. But after that first week, it's going to be a race to the bottom. Unless you can afford to support your Apple game with paid promotion post-launch, you're going to gradually go to the bottom. And that, going right out of the charts, that could easily happen within that 60-day period before you're getting the first money out of the App Store. So in order to fund that UA campaign, someone else has to fund it. It's either credit cards, venture guys, or pots of money within the publishers. So what we're doing at Pollen is we recognize this, and we were app developers ourselves who had this very specific problem. So we created a business recognizing that there's great certainty of the payout. It's just the timing issue is an issue for a lot of app developers. So what we do is we will pay out 95% of the proceeds in cash every 7 days. So that will allow you effectively, that takes all the latency out of the equation. And so if you have a good launch week, then you can afford to take the funds that you've earned and double down onto paid promotion. And then what we realized is the cash is interesting to developers, but there is actually something more interesting behind it, which is recognizing where most of this cash goes. And so for most people, there is, particularly in the early stages post-launch, there's effectively most developers look to take anything they're earning and to immediately recycle it back into paid promotion. So again, once you've tested your paid promotion formula and you know it works, you want to do as much as you can, as quickly as you can. So what we saw at the kind of indie end of the curve is basically the self-service portals from the ad network. So people will load up prepaid credit cards. They will then go and select their ads. They'll be displayed, and then the credit card will get charged every 2-3 days, whatever it may be. So in terms of actually ramping up before anyone can actually get credit terms, this seemed like a slightly clunky way to do it. On the other side of it, and this is something we've seen quite a lot of recently, is you may have app developers who have launched, they're getting extremely good traction, maybe they've been featured, they want to recycle that money into the ad networks, but the ad networks, when they look at it, they don't have they don't have enough of a credit or trading history to actually provide credit lines to the developers. So again, this seems like a really broken thing. You might be looking for a $100,000 credit line from an ad network. You'll have $100,000 of receivables that you can see in iTunes Connect, but there's nothing you can do to unlock it. So again, we think that's crazy, and part of our model then is actually looking at, we're putting in deals with a number of different ad networks just now, which allow us to effectively recycle the money from yesterday's sales into funding today's paid promotion. So our target here is 100%. So if you did $1,000 in sales yesterday, we'll look to fund the ad network with $1,000 the next day. So what we realized that if you do this properly, you can get into a virtuous circle. You can take the cash, you can roll it back into paid promotion. If you've got a formula that every dollar you put into UA is going to spit out more than $1 in LTV, then you want to be doing as much as you can and cycling money around this, around the curve. So you're taking the cash and you're investing it directly back into UA. And what that does then is, that for us is the whole idea of velocity capital. So it's enabling the sales that you've, it's enabling the value that you've created in the sales that you've made, unlocking that and then rolling it straight back into paid promotions. So instead of the cycle that you're on a very, very slow burn before you see any revenue out of your app, you can take it, you can double down, you can reinvest. The idea is you can, once you've worked out your monetization formula, you can get up on a much more kind of exponential type of curve. So I don't have time to go into the specifics just now, but one of the things we did within our own organization is we had as part of User, which is one of the co-founders, if you like, of Pollen. We had an app internally, and we decided to try our own methodology out on our app. So the app was doing very, very low numbers to start with, and we thought, okay, let's eat our own dog food here. Let's see if this really works. Spent a long time getting the formula right, and actually, I'll say this is actually before we were a funded business. So we were literally doing this on our credit cards. So we applied the methodology, and you can see how the numbers spike up. So Liam, who's our chief product officer, has written this great blog post with, you can see exactly how the numbers worked out. I will say mid-January, there's obviously a massive drop-off, and the reason for that drop-off is because we'd maxed out the credit card and we didn't realize. So it took 3 days, basically, for us to realize before we could pay it down, load some more money on it, and then ramp up the advertising. So there's some real-life examples in there. And I would encourage you, blog.pollen.vc, if anyone wants to read that post and look at it in a bit more detail. So just a couple of takeaways from today, and I think, it sounds obvious to say, but I'm going to say it again. This test and development cycle, do it relentlessly. If it takes you an extra week or month or 3 months, it's better to do that than to launch knowing that you're going to set out to fail. Because ultimately, the cold hard truth on the economic side is that no matter how much money you chuck at paid UA, unless you've got that formula right and tested, you're going to throw it away. And the other side of it is just think about how you're using your capital. So whether it's your own cash that you've put in from an indie point of view, or it's your venture funds, keep your venture funds in the bank and look at different ways of unlocking money and throwing it into user acquisition. So that's really the key things I wanted to talk about. We're going to be around for the rest of the day if anyone wants to ask questions. I don't know how we're doing for time, if anyone wants to ask questions now. Or?
Yeah, we've got time for we've got a few minutes actually.
Okay. He's prompted questions and no one's got their hand up.
So in the first case...
Can you say who you are where you're from?
Yeah. Hello, my name is Apostolos Dimopoulos. I'm from Upstream, Greece. And I would like to ask you, in the first case, where you have the weekly return of money, you say you're giving out 95 cents on a dollar.
Yeah.
So the monetization model is obvious. In the second case, you said you have 100% put into the ad account. So How do you make money there?
Good question. So if you are an ad network and you're looking at us, we effectively look like a media buying house where we're aggregating a bunch of traffic. And for the ad network, this is most often incremental, non-cannibalizing traffic that you wouldn't have been able to do anyway, and it comes with no credit risk. So obviously there is, that's where we look to collect on the other side. But we're trying to make it very, very simple from a developer point of view. It's hard to get better than 100%. So if you were going to do this anyway, we just take out all the inertia and allow you to do it on a daily basis.
Thank you.
Hi there, Andrew French from Ad Colony. Really smart business model. How are you guys funded? Where's your capital from?
So we have, we're equity funded by a bunch of different institutional and individual investors. And what we have underneath it is we have significant debt lines that we use effectively to advance the money and to run that part of the business. All done. Well, Ritesh and Liam and I are around for the rest of the day if anyone's got any questions on the model of the business.